Let's go ahead and call our Iowa City Community School Board meeting on Tuesday, April 14th, 2020 to order. Folks, I still need to log into Board Docs because of that short transition. I'm doing that right now. I think the first item up, though, is for us to review and approve the agenda for tonight.
Yes, that's the first.
And I would ask directors if someone would move to approve the agenda this evening.
So moved.
I move to approve. Second.
Kim, ready to vote?
Janet, it looks like JP is on the attendees, but he's not in our panel.
Okay, so Kim, did you hear
That's usually
that?
my job.
So we're going to need to get JP into the regular meeting. Maybe that we need to send another link to him.
I can shoot him an email with the link in it.
Okay.
That just took me out of Board Docs too.
Jamie heads up. Jamie head.
Oh, I see JP over there. How interesting.
Les is also over there if you're sending out links.
JP's on the attendee list, Kim.
Yeah, I got it. I'm trying to get an email to him here. Just a sec.
I sent one to him already, and I'm sending one to Leslie right now.
Oh, Sean, were you the motion to approve the consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay, and Lisa
Yep.
was the second?
Yep.
Wait a second and see if they jump in before we. There we go.
Okay, now it says I'm Steve.
Hi, JP.
I don't know why that didn't work that time.
I think we can get
So
going. I've sent Les a couple of different messages, so hopefully he'll be able to pick that up.
Yep, so we've got a motion and a second to approve the agenda tonight. And Kim, we're ready to vote.
Okay, the online voting is open.
I'm a yay, I'm logging in.
Thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you, Kim. Our consent agenda this evening. Any comments on accounts payable for folks who reviewed those this period? Hearing none. Any items directors would like to pull? Hearing none. Is there a motion to approve our consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Okie doke. We will move into public hearings. Our first up is the certified budget hearing.
Just a reminder, this is a normal part of our operating process. Certified budget has to be submitted to the state by April 15th each year. And so we have a process that begins in December and walks through each successive month and board meeting with a set of actions that we provide to you to provide both parameters on which we build the budget to ensure that we're moving in the right direction, and The significant component of this process is to ensure that we set our tax levy in such a manner that we have the greatest degree of flexibility as we move into the remaining part of the budget year as established by the state. So with that, I'll turn it over to Les for additional information to share.
Steve, we do have to hold off on those public hearings until 6 o'clock.
Oh, that's right, we do. I
Yeah.
apologize for that thing. I forgot we posted those for 6. I have a note here too. So Janet, if we take those 2 out of order and come back to those.
We'll move to the discussion items and come back to the public hearings
Yes, please.
at some point in the agenda after 6 o'clock. Okay, we'll go to COVID-19 update on teaching and learning operations personnel.
Amy and Matt, I'll let you take that away.
All right, Amy, I'll start if that's all right. Secondary wise, this last week, we've been really doing a lot of exploration around the move to a potential required environment with an anticipated knowledge that, you know, school may be off in May as well. And so, of course, we're following the lead from the governor about what that might look like, but we've kind of taken that mantra about, you know, preparing for the worst, hoping for the best. And so with that scenario around knowing that our kids that need credit acquisition for grades 8 through 11, and then also our seniors to get to graduation, we've spent a lot of time with the Teachers Association, with our building administrators, with guidance counselors, with a lot of different internal stakeholder groups there, trying to look at what that would look like and what could some teacher expectations be, what would student expectations be, anything from the amount of coursework kids could be asked to complete, how grades and credits and withdrawals would pass into all those scenarios. So we've really been doing a lot of behind the scenes work with that while we've continued the voluntary educational enrichment opportunities that are posted on a weekly basis there by content area. And so we anticipate here towards the end of the week, we'll have a pretty robust communication that will go out to students and teachers at the high school level in that regard, and then the junior high would continue to carry on with the voluntary ed services. And so that's kind of the opening for tonight. Diane can of course follow up any comments she might have on the secondary end, but that's kind of the breadth of my comments for this evening. So Amy, if you want to pick up from there.
Sure. On the elementary side of things, we continue working through our voluntary educational enrichment opportunities. We continue to prioritize our 4 goal areas, connecting with our families and our students to see how they're doing socially, emotionally, helping families to access Clever, and then accessing Dreambox and Lexia Core 5, our reading and math products, and then monitoring usage. This week on Monday, we brought together a team of 93 participants in our IDS teacher librarian principal meeting on Monday to then talk about how we were going deeper in those 4 areas. And this includes sharing with families this week a suggested voluntary elementary schedule that families could potentially follow if they wanted to provide some structure. Within that schedule, we're highlighting, of course, portions of their day where we would like them to be thinking about using Dreambox and Lexia Core 5. And we really centered the discussion this week on the idea of continuity of instruction. And while we know that parents are doing their absolute best they can with their students out there right now in this climate, that they might think that the best thing to do would be to offer a bunch of different resources. And so we're really trying to hone the message that if one way to help ensure some continuity of instruction is through usage of those products. In the meantime, then the work on the teacher side of things is we've got them to get them to know the products better. Some of our teachers are well versed in using these products. Some have been using them before, and others it's the first time. So really getting them to understand what the dashboards look like, to see that if students are making progress, if they're in the product at all, and then to also help them troubleshoot. So not only helping parents troubleshoot when they get stuck in the product, maybe they need a little bit of instruction. We can point parents towards a parent resources hub, or even the teacher can be offering some instructional tips at that point to help them wade through that. The other thing that we've are releasing this week, it's exciting. We've had our teacher librarians working on a reading challenge, and they've done that for K2, 3, 6, 7, 8, and 9, 12. And we're going to highlight that this week with our families as well. Teacher communication went out around that today, then to follow up with yesterday's meeting, and then parent communication is going out tomorrow around those additional items. Turn it over to Diane.
Sure, just to add just a couple pieces of information there. So Dreambox and Lexia, we continue to monitor that usage. So we jumped from Lexia, we were about 26% usage in March. Now in April, we're at 37% usage. And then Dreambox, we went from 40% to 50%. So right now we have half of our kids at least on Dreambox. And so we know we can get at least half of them on Lexia, and we continue to look to see those numbers increase, and they've been increasing by about 500 kids every week. So we hope to see those continue to increase. And then at the secondary, just maybe a little piece of information too. Friday, the governor kind of gave us a little more flexibility with our seniors to say that if we would like to, we can consider waiving graduation requirements for seniors. So typically seniors have to have that 4 years of language arts and 3 math, 3 science, 3 social studies, and then PE and health. And then we have some elective requirements. So we are able to, with some flexibility, be able to waive some of those to help some seniors who maybe wouldn't have been able to graduate due to COVID to be able to graduate now.
Diane, can you share if I asked this last week, but I know the numbers have gone up, but are you guys still working on something where you're seeing numbers in certain schools or classrooms or grades or wherever low to try and get those numbers up for some of that use?
So, you know, again, we met with all the administrators and IDS and teacher librarians on Monday to reiterate this goal. We do have some schools, and I shared that with them on Monday. We have some schools that are approaching that are at 60% usage. So looking at some of those highlights there. I think teachers, we're just seeing that it's all individual cases, you know, so what might work in one situation or with one classroom doesn't work with another family. But we just keep trying to pound the pavement, I guess, and trying to get families to log in, making sure they've got the technology access and then the knowledge as to how to do that.
I'm sorry, you cut out on my setup when you were talking about participation rates. So could you do that again, please?
Sure. So at in Lexia, which is the reading program, we went from 26 to 37%. So 26% in March to 37 in April. And then for Dreambox, we went from 41% in March to 50% in April.
So that's a total of 87% participation?
No, 50% just means that, you know, it could be the same kids that are on Dreambox and Lexia. So we might just have 50% of our kids that are taking advantage of maybe both programs.
And how about the high school kids?
So high school, we don't have them on Dreambox or Lexia or an online program like that. So I don't have those stats. I know individual teachers are kind of looking at like how many kids are logging into Canvas and, you know, responding to emails and things like that. But otherwise I don't have those stats on hand. I don't know if Matt has anything or not.
No, I would say based on some of the anecdotal stuff we get back, we're about in the same ballpark between that 30 to 50%. Engaging in some of the voluntary activities, either district-wide or from their classroom-specific teachers. So we'd obviously anticipate that to increase if we move to required, you know, for those students. But that's kind of where we're at right now with some of the participation data we're seeing.
I can jump in really quick with some Canvas data too that I pulled. We have 58% of our junior high and high school students have logged into Canvas within the past week, and 82% have logged in since the closure began.
Logged in one time at least since the closure began, is that right?
Correct, yep.
Thanks, Adam.
So Matt, is it possible for the high school teachers to take attendance in some meaningful way like they would if kids were coming to a classroom?
So attendance would be part of that required environment, Charlie. So the kind of the big differentiator between doing the voluntary ed services and the required would be around grading and attendance. And so they are tracking, usage data. Like I said, some of those anecdotal pieces we see back from buildings in that 30 to 50% participation range if students engage in an online experience or in an online Zoom meeting is kind of what we're anecdotally seeing. But like Adam said, from Canvas data, being able to access that. So we've talked about ways we would take attendance, in those environments, whether it would be are they in that Zoom room? Are they accessing the Canvas page or engaging in the activity? But right now we're not taking attendance because that would be a component that would have us in that required environment. But certainly if we make that switch, then we would need to have a way to take that attendance, and we'd have a better idea on participation rate at that point.
And just to clarify on that piece too, although the state does ask us if we move to required to take attendance, they've also said that we shouldn't use attendance as part of the grades that kids are given.
And they've given us wide latitude in what we want to define locally as taking attendance.
This is Brady. I know most of the colleagues I have at the junior and senior highs have some sort of spreadsheet that they're working off of that's collecting data based on efforts they make to engage and then which particular students respond to that. So looking at emails and Google Forms and Canvas, visits and participation in a Canvas conference. So that's, I think, most teachers are doing that and trying to look at it, not just are they looking at my Canvas page, but do I have some sense that they're engaging in some learning and I'm able to give them some feedback. So it's figuring out a system, that's a little trickier, but it's definitely happening with individual teachers and then also at the building levels too.
Think we have any idea or any notion about how long it will take us for most teachers or all teachers to be able to determine how many of their kids are actually participating in remote learning? We're going to be able to do that by the end of this month, or?
Yeah, I think we'll be able to capture some larger data sets there, Charlie, and based on what we decide to move forward with. Like Brady said, I mean, that's part of what we're developing behind the scenes, and that's why I called it anecdotal at this point, because it's not necessarily consistent, but buildings are tracking, and then depending on if we stay in that voluntary frame or if we go to the required frame with an extended closure, then yeah, we do need to track those rates. We do need to get responses back from kids. We need to have systems in place to continue to contact kids that don't access, and how many attempts have we made to try to do that. I think those are all very relevant pieces, and so we'll have some harder numbers as we move forward on what those rates look like, and even what hopefully we can get some demographic data, what those rates look like. I mean, one thing we've looked at now is already pulling how many kids were failing at the time of the closure, and starting to look at some of those rates for big data too.
And Charlie, just one thing to expand on what Matt just said there, which I think is a really key point. While we're in a voluntary mode, keep in mind that we may have some students who've simply elected not to log in, not to participate. If we move to a required mode, that likely will see a transition in students' attendance and participation just simply by moving from voluntary to required.
Yeah, and I think that's a reasonable expectation. I am concerned greatly, frankly, that we'll go to a required mode and we'll wind up with 80% of the kids participating, 20% not participating, or some other set of numbers even more.
I think the thing that we're trying to work through, Charlie, without getting into kind of the details of those pieces before, they're all refined and we're ready to share all of those components out to all of our different stakeholder groups, is we don't want to fail anybody. Failure is not an option for us. We're not looking at failing anybody. That's a belief we're working from as we approach this, that we believe kids should have a lot of choice in this situation that best meets their current need and their current situation, whether that's grades that are important to them, whether that's trying to take care of their family and having the space to be able to do that in this environment. And so I think the best thing we can do is give a lot of options and presume that we're trying to do no harm to our students through the process. And so I think operating from those beliefs, I think I'm feeling confident about the options we're putting forward, that we'll be able to meet that whole continuum of what we're trying to serve. And I think that's our job, is to provide a lot of choices in this situation, because it is unique. And I think it's also our job to look at how a system we design now could be a system we have to come back to in the reality in the fall, and that we better, the things we scaffold into now will be important for us potentially later on. And so how do we learn from that? How do we grow that? And how do we make sure we're not replicating work that could be useful now? So just a couple other thoughts.
Okay, thank you. The doing no harm phrase makes a lot of sense to me.
I actually picked up on that phrase too. This is Janet, Matt, and there's do no harm in terms of not leaving students behind, that 20% that Charlie was referring to. But I also want to make sure that we're not doing any harm to other students who need or need more stimulation, more content, more activity to keep them progressing really, really effectively. And I know that it's really tough in this environment. And I appreciated Brady's comments of, what junior high teachers are doing, for example, in terms of, tracking their engagement and tracking how students are participating. And, I just think we need to continue, and I know everyone is, but continuing to find ways to engage and in that sense of do no wrong. We don't want to leave students behind, but we also need to stimulate those students who need that level of additional, and they're hungry and they want to do more, and they, the online voluntary activities, I'm hearing are pretty quick and easy and done, for kids to get through. And is there more that we can provide? And so I think that also falls into kind of the do no harm mindset as well. So I fully appreciate this is a tough environment, but I do think that as we scaffold and build and build the muscle and the tools and the discipline and the engagement models, it is something that we can have going forward and build upon. Should we do more online learning in the future, or should we have to based on, another resurgence of COVID? But I think do no harm is a very broad reaching.
Yeah, I'd agree with you totally there, Janet. I mean, I think that's where we're talking about how do we do no harm across that whole continuum, for students, that those needs are different for everybody. And I think that's where the choice, factor is going to continue to come in, even in a required model that we look at, that there's some kids that and families that will want more and expect more, and we need to give them that. And there's other ones that aren't going to be ready to meet us at that point. And we need to make sure we're taking care of them too. And so I think that's why it's a belief statement for us, right? And that's why when we say that's what we believe, then we need to believe that on all ends of that continuum and what that means. So I'm feeling good about the option that we're going to bring forward, and that what we'll be communicating here the coming days, the rest of the week, and as we continue to work with our teacher groups and that. And I think next Tuesday conversation, around that, we'll have a lot more substance to talk from.
That's great. Thank you.
And maybe Janet, just add one last comment to it. So I know that I think you've done as a board, you've done a good job recognizing that, we need to work at both ends of the tail and the curve there, and to make sure that students that are struggling are provided those opportunities. But please know that the team has been very focused on making sure that the kids at the leading edge of that curve have those opportunities available to them, both to continue to stay engaged. We know you've gotten a lot of communication with some specific concerns about grades and how that factors into it. They've had that conversation. Advanced placement tests have certainly been a concern among some of our folks that have communicated with you. And that was one of the first sets of resources that was pushed out right at the beginning, because we wanted to make sure that those kids stayed on track from that standpoint. So I just commend the team for recognizing that they need to look at the full spectrum and need to meet the needs of all students.
Thanks, Steve. So does that take us through the updates from teaching and learning?
I believe it does. So now we're on to an update on operations and personnel.
Sure, good evening. Nice to see everybody again. We don't have anything really new to offer this evening, except just a little bit more information on some of the things we talked about last week. First, with food service, we did add another site beginning on Monday, and we've seen our numbers continue to rise. And so to tell you a little bit more about that, I'll let Allison share some of that news. I thought I saw Allison on here.
She was. I'm looking for her on my pictures.
Okay. I'll go ahead and share the news. This continues, I think, to be a positive story for us. Beginning last Wednesday through today, we've done over 200 meals a day, or excuse me, 200 individuals a day. So we continue to see our numbers climb. Today we served 2,175 individuals, which means that's over 4,000 meals that were delivered to people today across our district at various sites. Last week, as a total, we did over 20,000 meals. That's more than double the number of meals we did in the first week. So over a 3-week span, we doubled the number of meals that we were providing to children throughout the area, which we think is something that is great. It's great for our folks that need it, and we're happy to be able to provide that, and we'll continue to do so. We're settling into a nice routine, but for the weather this week, and I think that we will continue that as we move through this month until we get word differently from the governor. No changes on what we've shared about our facilities. They remain closed. We have sent out reminders to our athletic programs about, hey, please, encourage your student athletes not to congregate. We know, though, it's not just our athletes, it's across the broader spectrum of the community. We want people to get outside and be active when they can, but we also don't want to unintentionally put people in health harm's way. And so we will continue to have signs posted that our facilities, and including our athletic complexes, are closed until we get additional information from the state on those pieces. That's a quick overview of where we are from facilities and food service. Adam, do you want to, and we didn't really touch base on this before, but do you want to add anything on distribution of technology? I don't think that really came up on the teaching and learning side, but do you want to provide me an update on where we are on that with our families?
Yeah, absolutely. I have some new numbers for this week. Total devices requested, we are now at 2,451. Those requests do continue to come in. We've had about 127, I think, new requests this week, and we have fulfilled 2,036 of those. We've had a few bumps in terms of our staff and availability to process some of that. So kudos to the staff who have come in and done that in a very safe way at the ESC. So we're plugging through those. We fulfilled right around 300 today, and we'll try to continue to do that. On the internet provision side, it has been a lot rockier. MediaCom has really struggled to fulfill requests. We have 230 requests currently through MediaCom. I don't have exact numbers of how many of those have been filled and how many have not. They have told me again that they expect that most of those will be completed within 3 to 10 days. They've had a little bit of a curveball, and they're not the only telco in this boat where corporate guidance has been for them to not enter customers' homes, which has really slowed down installations because they have to do the external installation, then send the cable modem with instructions to the household. But we do continue to work with them. We continue to check in with them each day, try to get more information. That said, we have allocated about 750 hotspots to families. So we have about 750 hotspots that we've deployed. Most of those are at the secondary level. And we have requests in. Right now, there are months-long backlogs for hotspot orders from every vendor. And I had a conversation with the other UEN tech directors about how we're all kind of fighting each other for those resources. However, we did identify a couple of non-commercial streams that we can go through, and we have requests in for both through 2 of those. One is we've requested 200 additional hotspots from Sprint through the Sprint 1 Million grant program that the district's been a part of for a few years. And early indications are that they will be able to fulfill those, so I don't yet have a timeline. And then we've also put in a request for an additional 200 hotspots through League of Innovative Schools, which is a consortium the district's a member of that's working to provide internet access for its member districts' students. So We have requests for 400 additional hotspots through those entities. And just continue plugging away on that one. Internet has been more of a challenge than the device side has.
Adam, quick question on the Sprint hotspots. With the merger with T-Mobile complete with them now, has there been any discussion or follow-up on if that will continue? Or I know it's the full merger won't take place here yet, but
yeah, I mean, you know, I never say for sure when there's a merger or a situation like that, but we did get a communication after that merger was announced from Sprint saying that the Sprint 1 million program should be unaffected. There are actually some pretty substantial federal incentives for telcos to provide grant programs like this. So even in a merged company, I would imagine that our spot in that program is safe, at least for the time being.
Any additional questions or other questions on the ops side before we move to personnel?
just another quick technology question. And this is a if question, I guess. If we don't send students back to school at all, I would assume you guys have been discussing a plan for return of technology from seniors and people.
Correct. And, you know, there's a lot of hypothetical there. So we've tossed around some ideas of what that would look like. One advantage we have is that every device, even the ones issued during the closure, are assigned to specific students. So we know exactly who has each device, which allows us to contact individuals directly, whether that's seniors returning devices, or, you know, if we get to the point where the closure extends to the summer and we look at getting devices back that were issued as part of the closure, likely what we will end up doing is for seniors devices, establishing a turn-in option for them that would be probably, you know, at facilities on certain days, certain times that would be available. And that's something that we would really pursue. Obviously, you know, we need to get those devices back and get them accounted for. Obviously, the eventuality is one we've never played out, so we'll have to see exactly how that will work once we get to the point where we know what the duration of the closure will be.
So Adam, for equipment that's turned back in by students, have we thought through a protocol for cleaning that equipment, and so we're not?
We've actually reached out for, we've reached out for quotes to from industrial cleaning companies that can provide those services. And obviously we don't have a timeline, so we have nothing hard, you know, firm that's been lined up. But that's an approach that we think we're probably likely to take, is some of those companies are certified to deal with technology equipment in ways that won't damage it, but will also sterilize it.
We don't have anything new this evening from a personnel perspective as it specifically relates to any changes necessitated by COVID. However, we did talk last week about the change we're making in how we interview candidates, and a question was raised about the pool for our elementary principals, and we wanted to follow back up with the board and provide that information this evening. So I think Nick has that to share.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, we wanted to follow up on the question from Director Malone, and we have 7 total candidates that we're going to be talking to over the course of the next 2 days, which we're really excited about. We're engaging a good amount of the school community's parents, teachers, and then fellow administrators, and it'll be a great opportunity to kind of examine the strengths of these individuals. 3 of those candidates are diversity candidates. 5 are female, 2 are male. We have 4 internal candidates, someone who's working within our system, and 3 that are external candidates. All have some type of leadership experience, with 6 of them actually serving in either a principal or assistant principal type role. So you can see we're going to have our work cut out for us as we make some decisions. I know Amy and I are both excited about the interactions we've had thus far in the process, and we're looking forward to seeing how the interviews play out these next few days, and using our new interviewing process, as Chase has described previously, to see how that can help us be more efficient and effective in our interviewing. So that gives you a basic breakdown of the folks that we'll be bringing in these next 2 days.
Great. Thank you, Nick.
That's it from us from an operations side.
Great. Thank you, Chase and team. And again, just a complete thank you for all the district staff and all you're doing to support family, students, your own team members throughout all of this process. It's a learning process for sure. And it feels like we're getting our arms around this and making some really positive strides. So anything else from the team in terms of the COVID response plans?
I have a question, if I may, and throw it back to the, I guess, on the teaching and learning side. And this is probably more for Lisa. I know we've got a couple emails and read some stuff about the different services that the AEA provides, depending on whether we're doing voluntary or required learning. And I don't know what's true and what's not. So I could just hope somebody could kind of speak to that a little bit.
Yes. The AEA does, excuse me, the AEA does provide support services such as speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy. They always provide those services. In a model where we are providing voluntary services, they would not provide those instructional services, just like we don't provide IEP instructional services. So we don't provide specially designed instruction, progress monitoring, anything like that associated with IEPs during the time of voluntary services either. So those same instructional services that are required from AEA, they don't provide those either. It's equivalent to any other kind of school closure, like winter break or summer break or anything like that. When we go to required services, that is when they would consider providing those services again. So as we look at any kind of a plan for required services, I'll be working with AEA to, verify that that is my understanding of that is actually the case, and then how would we work that out? In any grade spans where required services apply, we need to have IEP meetings for students to determine what those services how they would look, because they obviously, in most cases, won't look the same as they would when students are at school. But we'll prioritize which meetings need to happen first, and we obviously can't have hundreds of meetings on the same day, so we'll work out how to get through all those meetings and get them done. And for some students it won't look a lot different, and for some students it'll look very different. So right now during voluntary services, our special education services focus on access. So we're helping families and students access the same optional resources that have been provided to everyone. And then also pushing out some resources that only entitled students have access to. So some of our resources on our general resource list, maybe some students aren't able to access, but those same students have access to other materials that are being pushed out through their case coordinators. We're also working on a website that will go live, and I'll speak more to this next Tuesday, but a link off of our website that will be some resources to assist parents who are managing students with special needs at home, and some structural tools for them to help them assist them through their days at home. So we're just trying to get tools to people right now and assist with access. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I really appreciate the clarity or clarification, I guess. And I think that's one of the, from the public perspective and the emails we get, that's one of the things people are saying is that, there's, they're missing those services because we're not doing the required learning. And so there's more to it that's not available. So I think that's something, we have to, I know you guys are all keeping it in mind, but something, I have to keep in mind as we kind of go through this path of, what's next steps and stuff, because that's pretty important piece in my opinion. So thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, I think I've heard a lot about that too, and I'm sure that is true. we're trying to make sure that our students with special needs have access to the same or similar things that all other students have access to first. But then above and beyond that, you know, heard a lot of parents, myself being one of them, talk about how difficult it is to try to pull off doing your own job at home while you've got your kids underfoot, trying to manage being their teacher and, you know, trying to do your own job and trying to keep your family life intact and everything that you've got now to try to cope with on a daily basis. And then, you know, try to multiply that out by having, you know, the children in the house, trying to educate them who have some very special needs too. I'm guessing that, you know, there are some parents who are having a really hard time doing that, and I would be too. So our first order of business is to get some tools that will potentially, we hope, will help with that. So that's what we've been working on all this time, and that part of our site will go live before next Tuesday, and so we'll talk more about that then.
Do have another question for Steve, and that you might be able to help us out with. Regardless of if we go back to school or not for this year, the way I understand it, the university sites are off limits. So, you know, if any type of graduation were to happen, that's not going to happen there. So I would assume you guys are thinking about alternative locations or alternative ways to make that happen, if possible. And if so, could you share any of those thoughts with us?
Yeah, so at this point in time, we've had the conversations with our secondary end team. I know at least a couple of the newsletters that the principals have sent out that have included an update that Carver Hawkeyes closed through June, and so we'll be looking for alternative options. And really, to be honest with you, at this point in time, while we've considered both internal district options, inside and outside, also looked externally in the community to see what other options there are. We haven't gone too much farther forward with it until we determine what the next steps are from the governor's office. So I've been busy planning for it, but haven't made any specific choices until we have a better idea what's going on.
Thank you.
I'm just going to guess that by the time graduation rolls around, having large groups of people in one place will still be a bad idea. So are you talking about any kind of virtual scenario?
That has been one that we've talked about, yes.
Steve, speaking of guidance from the governor's office, I think that she had committed to you all that she would give 2 weeks notice, and by the calendar, that's tomorrow. Has she planned a webinar or a press conference? Do you have anything on your calendar by which she's going to communicate with you? Are we still in the dark?
She does press conferences every day at 11 o'clock. And while it wasn't the topic of her prepared comments today, it was one of the questions asked her by a reporter. And she actually shared that she had told us that we would give us 2 weeks advance notice, which she interprets as by Thursday. So we have 2 press conferences potentially in front of us, one tomorrow and one Thursday, where we're likely to get some kind of update. So we hope it's tomorrow, but be prepared. It could be as late as Thursday.
Other questions on COVID response? Anything else, folks? If not, we'll move to the next item, which is the care assessment update. I believe, Matt, you're going to carry that one?
Yeah, so we just wanted to put the item on here again as we approach closer steps to an interview here with the candidate pool. And I'll ask Kate to jump in here too if she has anything to add. So the job description there is attached to the agenda again tonight, and then kind of our process as we work through this, and obviously a couple gaps in there with some of the COVID pieces going on, or we would have moved on this previously. And then just a kind of a brief summary there of what we're thinking about around interview team, knowing again in this environment it's a little different than maybe we would have handled that, or some of the feedback we had gotten from you guys potentially about how that might look. But we did want to still account for multiple stakeholder groups to be involved in that process. We feel like that's an important piece of it. We still feel we're looking for somebody more on the safety and security end for this original position. But we also note that we've talked about exploring a potential second grant opportunity and have some ideas about making sure that mental health is a definite part of that team and a definite part of the process, and some things we want to explore to do that. We've talked about a potential purchase service type of arrangement with one of our community providers to make sure they're consistently part of that group and team moving forward, and then how a potential second grant opportunity could actually identify a standing role on that team for the district. And so wanted to also give that lens that we know that's a critical part and a critical piece of why we're doing this work. But some of the initial things that the care assessment team would look at, we would try to look for somebody with some more background along that end and in the training aspect. I'm blanking on the specific terminology there right now, excuse me. But somebody that has some of that background or some of that depth of knowledge that isn't currently residing in our team. So a couple documents there for you to review. Wanted to take any questions or any thoughts you might have before we proceed into that interview stage.
Hey, Matt, can you give me a sense of who the community members, the two community members might be? Are we looking to engage from some of the groups that might be involved in a holistic care assessment team?
Yeah, and I think that's a piece we wanted to make sure if you guys had any feedback on who those needed to be, or not necessarily maybe specific names of people, but groups. You know, we would obviously look to like the University of Iowa's threat assessment team to see if there's, you know, somebody from that group we'd bring in. I think a couple of our community organizations we'd look to would potentially be UAY, Black Voices Project, Juvenile Court, you know, some of those same ones we've had listed on that sheet before. I think that's where we draw our community partners from to engage in this process. So if there's any definites for you guys, then we'd want to make sure they were included. But we would go back to that list of partners that we'd continue to show through this process to select those community members.
I am on the Juvenile Justice Task Force, and I think that's a decent place to look because their mindset, I believe, is in line with kind of the way we look at this with equity lens and disproportionality. And I think you'll also get, among the members of that group, we get a lot of overlap with UAY and the courts and just a lot of different groups that are also on JJYD. And so that might be a place to start. You know, even with Black Voices, you know, there's going to be some overlap there.
Great, thank you.
And I would agree with JP on that suggestion. Also, I think the university's threat assessment group might be a good source too. I know you mentioned the potentially looking at someone on their directive or director directive board, I guess. Also, the threat assessment coordinator for the university, if that would be a possibility. I think that would make sense to me anyway.
Thanks, Charlie. Yep. Anything else we're missing in our thinking or things you guys are thinking about there? I think it's pretty consistent what we've talked about all along. We just didn't want to just move on it since there'd been kind of some gap in time there, and thought that's why I asked for the agenda item last week to make sure we were still all on the same page with that one.
It looks good.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So I'm going to need to get some advice from Kim and Steve. We can't do the action items, I'm guessing, until we actually have public hearings, which can't be done till 6.
So I would ask that we do agenda setting. Yes.
Yep. So we will talk about our board meeting on the 21st. And it's a special board meeting with the focus on the COVID-19 school closure update. Hopefully we'll have some direction from Governor Reynolds in terms of whether there's an extension or not. That's really our agenda. I do think that we had talked about having, well, depending on how closed session goes tonight, we could also have some items on the 21st around Steve accepting your resignation and then voting on an interim superintendent. And so that's pending, though, kind of the work of the board in our closed session tonight. So that's sort of a placeholder. Hopefully we'll be able to make those items on the 21st, but we need to get through tonight before we can confirm that. Is there anything else that directors would like to see on our board meeting on the 21st?
I guess as a part of the COVID update, do we have a sense yet, or is there any idea about budget impact? Would there be any way to kind of report back on that, or are we keeping track of COVID-specific expenses, that sort of thing?
So Wes has a budget code that we're using for it because at this point in time, we're not sure what we're able to recover and what may or may not be eligible for some kind of relief inside either state or federal monies. And so we are tracking those. If nothing else, I'm looking for less on my screen here. There you are. I would presume that we could pull for you just a summary of that code and give you a dollar value for what's spent to date by next Tuesday under that code. So it would just be a gross reporting of it, if you will, but certainly give you some kind of perspective on it.
Steve, are we getting any savings, like utility bills? Are we seeing any reduction in heating, cooling? I mean, I don't know. I just wondered if there's anything on the savings side.
Janet, I'll take a shot at that one, if you don't mind, Steve. To Steve's first comments previously on the account, yes, we do have accounts set up. The DE in their guidance today set up what's known as a project code within the system to track all of those expenditures. Those expenditures would be anything that would be outside of things that will end up being funded by the education stabilization money. We'll probably have to charge specific things to that project. And so the items in this other project code will be probably more along the lines of, cleaning supplies, gloves, sanitation efforts, some of those type of things that would be more inclined to maybe file something with FEMA in relation to if they're not covered by educational stimulus. We haven't gotten the guidance yet for the education stimulus, so it's a little bit of conjecture on our part exactly how we're going to be able to, how things will get charged to that account. It's not a question of charging them there, it's just how it's going to work kind of mechanically, if you will. The allocation that will come will be based upon Title I allocation that is done to the state. They're using the same formula for that process. And so, depending upon how we've been told that the education stabilization to Iowa is 75% of the Title I allocation to Iowa. And so we get about 2.1 in Title I this year. So stabilization would equal about $1.61 million. So we'll see how accurate that is when it turns out, and then we'll work from that and do that. But if the process is similar to the ARA stimulus funds in 2010, it's something that we can certainly handle, and I don't expect it to be a challenge there. Was there a second part of your question, Janet?
She asked if there are any savings.
Oh, from a savings perspective, we're probably a little bit early to identify that from the utility side. We would anticipate there would be, just because there's not as many lights on, there's not as much water being used. Buildings probably are more efficient in terms of their heating because the doors aren't opening with all of those students running in and out on a regular basis. So we should anticipate something there, but we're still paying pretty much right now just the March bills. And so, the second half of March and April, we haven't seen those yet to see what the impact of those would be. We will experience a little bit of savings on the transportation costs because, as you recall, a couple weeks ago, you approved a contract that pays at 82% of the contracted rate. So that 18% will be a savings to the district that we will have. We'll also have some savings on substitute teacher costs. not being in session. So those are probably the three areas that I would say there will be some savings. Anything else would probably be incremental, some supplies, less paper usage, some of that. But depending upon whether we go back to school or have any wrap-up activities, in May or June, or have to do things to catch up in August, those may catch up with us again a couple of months down the road. So.
Thanks, Les. Okay.
Janet,
yes, please.
Janet, for the agenda setting, should we go ahead and put the Lucas update on the agenda, or should that be dealt with in another way?
Steve,
so I do have,
do you know?
Yeah, actually, I just late this afternoon, right before we went into exempt session, I did get some communication with Joe that he has made contact with Ann, and he is getting a report from her, which I should be able, hopefully, to get out to you tomorrow morning. So, Charlie, as early as tomorrow morning, I should have some feedback for you on where things are at with that. And hopefully after we've all had a chance to review that, then we can decide whether or not that's something we need as an agenda item, or if she's given us enough of an update that we know where she's going.
Okay, thank you.
That's good. That's some progress there. Anything else directors would like to see next Tuesday on our main board meeting agenda? Hearing none. I know that we also we're looking to have an exempt session next Tuesday as well, starting at 4, just to continue our conversations from today and to get some updated information. And so that will be helpful. We'll schedule that at 4. Our regular board meeting will be at 5. And I think that might be it from an agenda setting standpoint. We have 60 seconds to kill before 6 o'clock, the magic hour. And so Sean, get ready to read those public hearings. Clear your voice, get a drink of water, get ready for those too.
We could do director liaison reports.
Yeah, I mean, do folks have things they want to just comment on?
Hopefully you're staying at home.
Or all of our meetings are virtual.
Or unless you go to work in the hospital.
That's true. Yep.
But I do have a mask and face shield, so. I'll tell you, teaching in a mask and face shield is not ideal.
Next week, you should wear it for us, JP.
Maybe I will.
So I know all of us have cloth masks that we use for going out, and we can all wear them in our next meeting in solidarity. So the magic hour is upon us.
It is,
we
yes.
can cover the public hearing on certified budget hearing.
I think you're going to have Les or speak to it a little bit, or am I just going to read it?
I mean, Steve
I think
started
you can read
on this.
Yep, I think you can read that first, and then actually I would say that when we get to the action item further down in the agenda, we'll just have Les add any comments to it at that point in time. So you can do both for the public hearing notices, and then when we get to the action items, we can talk about that.
All right. Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the district's proposed fiscal year 2021 certified budget and setting the tax rate. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on March 24th, 2020. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on March 27th, 2020. Are there any questions from the board related to the certified budget and setting the tax rate? Are there any questions from the public related to the certified budget and setting the tax rate? I guess I look at a chat thing to see if anybody does.
Okay, thanks, Sean. We'll move to the next public hearing on the conveyance of proposed Longfellow Elementary parcel.
All right, now is the time and place for the public hearing on the district's proposed conveyance of district property with legal descriptions provided in the attached documentation to the residential homeowner adjacent to the Longfellow Elementary property. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on March 31st, 2020. Are there any comments from the board? Are there any comments from the public?
Okay, thank you, Sean. Now we'll move to the action items, and the first is around our certified budget and tax certification. So I know that there were some comments and discussion that we wanted to have before voting on this. Steve?
So I will, I already went through my comments about the process itself, so I'm just going to let Les chime in with any additional details that he'd like to share prior to the board voting.
I guess I'd just like to thank you for the board's participation in this process. If you recall, we started back in January giving you some budget assumptions and worked you through the process over the last couple months. The certified budget process has to be done by April 15th to be in full compliance, and so we're sneaking inside that window tonight. This process sets the tax rate to the community. The tax rate that we've set this year is up a little between 4 and 5 cents over last year. A very significant portion of that has to do with the additional general obligation bonds that we sold in February. However, that rate is actually 17 cents less than what we had promised the voters that it would not exceed back on the vote in September of 2017. The reason for that is we got very favorable interest rates when we did sell, as well as premiums on those, and the timing was very good for us because we were accelerated the projects, and so everything pieces kind of fit together on that puzzle. But and as well as taxable valuations went up to support that rate. The general fund rate is very similar to what it has been in the last couple years. And so with that, I would entertain any questions on that rate. It'll, after approval tonight, or assuming approval tonight, it will be submitted to the Department of Management tomorrow, which is the culmination of that process. And it'll also be delivered to Travis Weeper's office at the county offices, and he has to verify the official publication and that type of things. But those are the next two steps in the process. And once that is done, the really nitty gritty, the budget process begins as we put together all of the pieces for the staffing pieces. The negotiations will be the big part, as 85% of our budget is our staff costs. And so we'll start working on it on a more detailed line perspective as we move forward, pending a lot of things related to COVID and anything from the legislature or federal funding.
Questions for Les? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the ICCSD FY 2021 proposed certified budget and tax certification?
So moved.
Second.
Thanks, JP and Charlie. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you so much. And Les, I just want to say thank you again for a job well done on the budget. I know we have great confidence in your ability to move through all of these details and shepherd us through a really strong process every year. So just want to extend my thanks to you and for all the work that you do to keep our budgets in really, really good shape. So appreciate it very much. Our next action item is to approve resolution for disposition of land at Longfellow Elementary. Steve, is there any commentary on this one before we move into the action?
No, so this is a real simple, straightforward process. You'll remember that part of our facilities master plan work has involved extensive work along the edges of our property. And as we go through that process, the surveying that we go through occasionally creates an opportunity for us to better define property spaces. For those of you that know Longfellow Elementary School, on the west side of that parcel, it turns out that our property actually runs through the garage and the driveway of the house that's there. And so as we've done with Lincoln and City and other areas where we found those types of challenges, we've worked with the neighbor and with our property team to determine the appropriate disposal of our property to make their property whole and maintain the integrity of our school boundaries.
Thanks, Steve. Any questions from directors on this slip of land next to Longfellow? Hearing none, I would accept a motion to approve the resolution for the disposition of land at Longfellow Elementary.
I would move approval of the resolution.
Second.
Thanks, Charlie and Sean. Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Fantastic. Well, that concludes our meeting this evening. Thank you, everyone, for your discussion and contributions and good ideas and commentary. I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Everyone in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All right. Thanks, folks. We'll see you in the next Zoom. Good night, everyone. Thanks.
Good night. Thank you.